Hi everyone, it's Tammy. Want to apologize first of all for the quality of my video. I normally use my iPhone to record and I'm still doing that tonight, but I cracked mine, so in order to record this I have to flip my phone around backwards, and so you may see the camera flip around back and forth. So of course tonight I'm addressing the issue of the changes in IDEA, where the terminology for emotional disability actually changed from serious emotional disturbance to just emotional disturbance. And then I'm also going to go beyond that and discuss the change from emotional disturbance to emotional disability. So my research indicates, as does our text with Yale, the reasoning behind the original change in that language was simply about removing a stigma for the students who qualified for the services under this disability category. In its origins, IDEA was all about providing the education that met the needs of students with disabilities through, of course, federal funding. Congress stated early on that disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the rights of an individual to participate in or contribute to our society, which I think is really the premise for maybe the change in this terminology. I believe that the change plays a large role in ensuring that these students' roles, first as students, but then later on even as citizens, is not diminished, as is stated. As with some other terms, for example, changing mental retardation to intellectual disability, changes have become necessary through the years, and we as educators and maybe even as parents take on that role of advocate for the special ed population. The removal of the word serious in the term was important, although the word itself is somewhat ambiguous. There's not a definition or a standard by which we measure what makes that disability serious or not serious. There was no change in standard or data collection or anything like that made the determination for the removal of that word, so it was solely for the purpose of changing that stigma that was attached to it. And Yale indicated this as well when he said that change was not intended to have substantive or legal significance. I would argue, though, that the change from disturbance to disability may have even had more of a positive change than removal of the word serious. There are a few national studies out there, although in the special education programs for students in the ED category of eligibility, studies have shown that those programs are actually very under-resourced, which I'm sure will come as no surprise to anyone in the education system. One particular study, though, that I found that was conducted by Sipperstein, Wiley, and Fornes, which was in 2011, showed a significant lack of academic success in students that are in the ED category, which may also not come as a big surprise to many of us. In fact, the ED students showed less progress than those students who had a specific learning disability. And this was after the third grade. Up until the third grade, they were, the research shows that they could make as much progress as the others, but then after that, their progress was much slower and not as significant as those with learning disabilities. The study also presented what I felt like was an alarming fact, or maybe it was just kind of an awakening for me, a realization that the children who are identified in the ED category in special education are only a small fraction of those students who actually have emotional or behavioral disorders, which means that those identified probably represent the most impaired of all children who have emotional and behavioral disorders. For example, at my school right now, we're currently participating in a study regarding the reduction of stress, or the effects of physical activity on the reduction of stress in students who have suffered trauma in their lives. Now, I only have 4 students in my school of 610 students who are specifically identified as emotionally disturbed. But I am aware of at least a minimum of 25 to 30 other students who I know have experienced trauma, often severe trauma, in their lives. And those are just the ones I'm aware of. These students show less academic success historically than students who are identified with specific learning disabilities. When I am able to have conversations with parents regarding this, if I were to use the phrase emotional trauma, which I sometimes do, they shut down pretty quickly. And I know if I were to use the term emotional disability, they would most certainly get up and leave. I think that term is something that would cause them to not want to continue our conversation. So I guess the question tonight has been whether removing the word severe from the terminology was significant. And I would have to argue that it may have reduced the stigma that was attached, but that was also kind of an ambiguous term. So just like the study that I referenced earlier that made that valid point that only the most severe students or students who have the most severe disability and trauma are those that are identified. So regardless of whether the word is there or not, that is in fact the types of students that the law deals with. So again, I hope I haven't rambled too much, but I guess my point is that while we can't collect data on the severity as easily as we can on other types of disabilities, removing the word has probably helped in allowing us to identify students with this disability simply because of the stigma that occurs with it. But we definitely are dealing with those with the most severe emotional disabilities. I hope everyone has a great night.